My parents abandoned my twins, so I built a new family without them. I never planned on becoming a single father, and I definitely never planned on raising twins while cutting my own parents out of my life. But life doesn't ask what you plan. It just hands you moments and waits to see who you choose to be. The day my twins were born should have been the happiest day of my life. In some ways, it was. I still remember the sound of their first cries. Two different pitches, overlapping, chaotic, alive. I remember holding one in each arm and feeling terrified in a way I'd never felt before. Not fear of failure, fear of losing them. What I didn't know then was that the people who raised me would be the first ones to walk away. My parents were the kind of people who cared deeply about appearances. They liked clean stories, successful narratives, lives that made sense from the outside. I didn't fit that anymore. Their disappointment didn't start with the twins. It started earlier, when my marriage fell apart. My wife and I had tried, really tried, but love alone doesn't survive exhaustion, resentment, and two people growing in opposite directions. By the time the twins were born, she was already gone, emotionally first, physically soon after. She left quietly. A note, a packed bag, no drama, just absence. I didn't blame her, not fully. We were both drowning. She just let go sooner. When I told my parents, they didn't ask how I was holding up. They asked how it looked. "What will people think?" my mother said. "You need to be careful," my father added. "This can ruin your future." I was 32 years old, holding two newborns and being warned about reputation. At first, they helped, or at least they performed help. They visited the hospital, took photos, told friends how proud they were, posted pictures online with captions about family and blessings. But once the reality settled in, the sleepless nights, the medical bills, the crying, the long-term responsibility, their enthusiasm faded. The first real crack came when I asked them for help watching the twins so I could return to work. My mother sighed. "We didn't sign up for this," she said. That sentence stayed with me. Not "we can't," not "we're tired," not "we're scared." We didn't sign up for this. As if the twins were a bad investment, as if love required a contract. I adjusted. I found childcare. I worked nights. I slept in fragments. I learned how to warm bottles with one hand and hold a screaming baby with the other. I stopped asking. That's when my parents started pulling away for real. They visited less, called less, asked fewer questions. When they did show up, they criticized. The apartment was too small. The twins were too loud. I looked tired. This wasn't sustainable. My father pulled me aside one evening. "You can't do this alone," he said. "I am," I replied. "That's not what I mean," he said. He suggested adoption, not temporary help, not shared responsibility, giving them up. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline that never came. "They'd have better opportunities," he said calmly. "You'd get your life back." That was the first time I realized my parents didn't see my children as people. They saw them as a mistake. I told him no, firmly, finally. The shift was immediate. They stopped hiding their frustration. My mother cried more often. My father became colder, sharper, impatient. They started talking about boundaries, but their boundaries only applied to inconvenience. The breaking point came 6 months later. I was late to a family dinner, my first mistake. One of the twins had a fever and I refused to leave until it dropped. When I arrived, tired and apologetic, my parents were waiting. Not with concern, with a decision. My mother spoke first. "We've talked," she said. My father folded his hands. "This situation isn't healthy, for anyone." They told me they couldn't be involved anymore unless things changed. "What things?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "You," my father said, "doing this alone." They offered a choice. Either I agreed to place the twins with another family, temporarily, they claimed, or they would step away completely. No financial help, no emotional support, no involvement. I felt something inside me go very still. "You're asking me to abandon my children," I said. My mother looked offended. "We're trying to help you." I stood up. No, I said. You're trying to save yourselves. That night, I took the twins home and didn't speak to my parents for weeks. When they finally called, it wasn't to apologize. It was to remind me of what I'd lose. You'll need us eventually, my father said. Everyone does. I hung up without replying. That was the moment my life split in two. The life where I waited for their approval, and the life where I chose my children, fully, permanently, without negotiation. I didn't know then how far they would go. I didn't know they'd try to take control in other ways. And I definitely didn't know that cutting them off would be the first step towards building something stronger than anything I'd ever had before. But that's how it starts. Not with anger, with clarity. The weeks after cutting off my parents were some of the loneliest I've ever known. It wasn't the quiet of the apartment that got to me. It wasn't the sleepless nights. It wasn't even the constant juggling of work, bills, and diapers. It was the absence of the people who were supposed to be family. The people who had promised protection, guidance, and love, staring back at me in their silence. I felt the weight of every decision. Feeding schedules, doctor appointments, choosing daycare. Every choice I made was final, irreversible, and I couldn't ask them for advice without triggering resentment, and I wasn't about to go back. And then the letters arrived. At first, they were polite, notes about "hope you're managing" or "thinking of you," signed Mom and Dad with careful penmanship that tried too hard to seem warm. I didn't reply. Then came the lawyers. Not threatening letters at first, just inquiries. Did I need help? Could arrangements be made? Could I reconsider? By the third week, the tone changed. Subtle threats buried in formal language. Warnings about legal rights, inheritance clauses, guardianship. Phrases meant to make me second-guess myself, make me doubt my own choices. I stared at the papers on the kitchen table, twins crawling at my feet, and realized something terrifying. Even if I survived the sleepless nights, the exhaustion, the chaos, they were willing to wage war to control my life, and I had no idea how to fight. That night, I cried for the first time in years. Not out of weakness, not because I felt defeated, but because the truth finally hit me. My parents weren't just absent in love. They were actively absent. They had chosen to abandon me and my children in every meaningful way. And yet, I knew I couldn't let their absence define us. I started small. I created routines for the twins that made them feel safe. Baths at 6, bedtime stories at 8, breakfast with pancakes on weekends. I learned how to juggle everything without dropping anyone. And when I did, I learned how to pick myself up and keep going. I found the support network where I least expected it. Rosa, a friend from college who had been quietly checking in for years, became my anchor. She dropped by, not to lecture, not to judge, but to help. She held the twin while I cooked dinner. She came over just to sit on the couch and let me breathe. Slowly, I realized something I hadn't in decades. Family could be chosen. It didn't need blood. It didn't need a legacy or a name. It needed presence. One afternoon, I was sitting on the living room floor, the twins playing with blocks, when Rosa said something that changed everything. "You're doing this," she said, pointing at the chaos around us. "They're gone and you're still here. You're building a family no one can take from you." I hadn't thought of it that way, not yet. My parents didn't realize they had made a choice that day, a choice that would shape our lives forever. By trying to protect their reputation, they had abandoned me. And in that abandonment, they had forced me to grow, to fight, to claim something more real than they had ever given. That growth didn't come easily. Legal notices became frequent. Guardianship claims, financial interventions, offers of help with strings attached. They assumed I would buckle under the pressure, that I would call, that I would beg for approval. I didn't. Instead, I documented everything. Every letter, every email, every text, every call. I learned to navigate the legal system as best I could, understanding my rights, protecting my children, and refusing to let them turn fear into compliance. It was exhausting. It was lonely. But it worked. Slowly, the threats lost power. Slowly, the legal maneuvers became meaningless against the foundation I was building for my kids. And then something unexpected happened. I realized I was happy. Not the fleeting happiness of being complimented or accepted, not the shallow relief of a parent's approval. Real happiness. The kind that comes from knowing you are enough. The kind that comes from seeing your children thrive because of your choices. My twins learned to laugh, to run, to explore. They formed bonds with Rosa and the older neighbors in the building. They didn't know about the absence of grandparents. They didn't ask. They didn't need to. I realized finally that I had become the parent I had always wanted. Present, engaged, loving. Imperfect, but fiercely protective. And in doing so, I had created a family that was resilient in ways my parents never could be. But the final test came when my father showed up unannounced. It was a Sunday morning. I had just finished making pancakes, the twins bouncing at the table, syrup dripping from their smiles. The doorbell rang. I ignored it, assuming it was a delivery. "Open up," my father's voice called. Cold, insistent. I froze. Rosa peeked out from the living room. "He's gone crazy," she whispered. I hesitated, then walked to the door. My father was there, impeccable as always, suit pressed, eyes sharp, not a hint of softness. "I need to see the children," he said. "I don't think that's a good idea," I replied. "They're my grandchildren. You don't get to decide." I realized in that moment something I had learned the hard way. Blood doesn't automatically make a family. Love does. Presence does. Protection does. "They are my children," I said calmly. "I decide who they see." He stared, as if my words had shattered some illusion he had carried for decades. Then he said something I will never forget. "You're making a mistake," he said. "Not a mistake, a choice." And just like that, he left. No threats, no appeals, no dramatic goodbye. Just a man who realized he no longer had control. I closed the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. The twins ran to me, laughing, sticky from syrup. Rosa hugged me from behind. And I understood something fully for the first time. My parents had abandoned me, yes, but in their absence, I had found something stronger. I had built a family. Not because I was forced to, not because it was convenient, but because I chose them every single day. And nothing could take that away. The weeks after my father's unannounced visit were quiet. Too quiet. I had hoped it was over, that he had realized we didn't need him, that my parents' influence had finally waned. But quiet doesn't last in situations like this. It came back subtly at first. My mother sent a bouquet to the apartment. No note, just flowers. I didn't respond. Then came messages disguised as concern. "We worry about the twins. Are you keeping up with doctor's visits? Are they eating properly?" I ignored them. I had already learned that their concern was a weapon, not genuine. Rosa noticed the tension before I did. "You're holding on to their opinion," she said one evening while I was cleaning up spilled juice. "You don't have to. You're enough. You are doing enough. The twins know that. You know that. Let it go." It wasn't easy. It never is when the people who were supposed to love you the most try to dictate your life. But I had learned that boundaries weren't just polite requests. They were survival tools. And if I wanted my children to thrive, I needed them in place. I decided to create a sanctuary. Not a physical space, though the apartment became cleaner and more organized than it had ever been, but a mental one. A place where the twins could be themselves without fear, where Rosa, our neighbor couple, and I could guide them safely. I started small. Saturday mornings became pancake rituals. We baked together. The twins measured flour and milk. I poured batter. Rosa helped fold laundry or read aloud while they played. Evenings, after baths and stories, became discussion hours. I would ask them what they thought about the day, about their little victories. It sounds simple, but for children who were learning the world with no safety net from grandparents, it was revolutionary. The change in their energy was immediate. They smiled more freely. They spoke with confidence. They developed small routines that gave them autonomy and pride. And I, for the first time in years, felt like I was leading a real family, not just surviving the chaos. Then came the legal challenge. One Monday morning, I received a formal letter from a law firm I didn't recognize. My parents were attempting to gain partial custody, an attempt thinly veiled in concern for the twins' well-being, but clearly aimed at reclaiming control. I read it once, then twice. The language was technical, intimidating, and designed to wear me down. I knew I couldn't do this alone, not entirely. I reached out to Jonathan, a lawyer Rosa had recommended months ago. Calm, precise, experienced in family law. He reviewed the documents and smiled at me in a way that made me feel like someone finally had my back. They don't have a case, he said simply. Legally, they have nothing. And emotionally, they're already gone. You have all the evidence you need to protect your children. That night, I held the twins tighter than ever. I told them stories about courage, about standing up for what you love, about choosing the people who matter, not the people who say they matter. I wanted them to understand, even at 4 years old, that love isn't about being blood-related. It's about showing up every day. Weeks turned into months. Visits from my parents dwindled further after their legal attempt failed. The letters became fewer, the calls rarer. And in that space, our little world flourished. We built traditions that had nothing to do with wealth or social status. Birthday parties in the park, evening walks through the neighborhood, small gifts picked carefully, not extravagantly. I watched my twins grow. I watched them develop personalities that amazed me. My daughter became incredibly curious, asking endless questions about why the sky was blue or white ants marched in lines. My son became empathetic, always concerned about the feelings of others. They mirrored the best parts of humanity, unspoiled by obsession with status or approval. And through it all, I met other people who would become my family. Nadia, an old friend from college, started volunteering to help with the twins after work. She brought energy, laughter, and a sense of normalcy I hadn't realized we were missing. She didn't need anything in return, just wanted to see the twins thrive. The neighbor couple became surrogate grandparents, teaching the twins how to garden, how to bake bread, how to respect elders without fear. They shared stories of their own children, the mistakes they had made, and the joys they had found. The twins listened with rapt attention, absorbing lessons not from authority but from love. For the first time, I understood the concept of chosen family. Blood may tie you to people, but love binds you to people you choose, and I had chosen wisely. Then came the moment that tested everything we had built. It was a rainy Tuesday. I was in the kitchen making soup when I heard the familiar knock on the door. The twins were playing blocks in the living room. Rosa had gone to pick up groceries. I didn't answer immediately, thinking it was a delivery. But the knock came again, louder this time, more insistent. I opened the door. My parents, both of them, wet from the rain, standing as though nothing had changed. "We want to see the children," my mother said, her voice calm, neutral, but carrying that unmistakable tone of entitlement. "No," I said immediately. "It's not fair," my father said. "They're our grandchildren." I held my ground. I had done everything to protect them, legally, emotionally, physically, and I wasn't about to let two people who had abandoned them dictate their lives now. "They are my children," I said, feeling a calm I hadn't felt in months. "I decide who they see, and right now, that's not you." The silence was heavy. My parents stared, perhaps trying to understand that their control was gone. Then my daughter ran into the kitchen holding a block. "Daddy, look," she said, smiling. My son followed, hugging my leg. I looked at my parents, then at my twins, then at Rosa, who had returned from the grocery store at just the right moment and gave me a small supportive nod. And I realized something fully. This was it. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. I had lost my parents, yes, but I had gained something far more important. A family built on love, not obligation, on presence, not approval, on trust, not control. I closed the door. They left, and I never heard from them again. It was terrifying at first, the finality of cutting them out completely, the fear of regret, the weight of societal judgment. But it didn't matter, because my children were safe, happy, loved, and that was more than I had ever had with my parents.